stood behind the one-way glass watching Dennis Calhoun swagger into the warehouse like he owned the place, barking orders at the younger workers who scrambled to avoid his path. The same man who'd thrown my clothes onto the front lawn 10 years ago, screaming that I was worthless trash who'd never amount to anything. He had no idea that the new regional manager everyone was whispering about was the 16-year-old boy he'd kicked out into the rain on the worst night of my life. The morning sun cut through the warehouse windows, catching the dust particles floating in the air as Dennis cornered a young forklift operator. "You call that stacking? My grandmother could organize pallets better than that, and she's been dead for 5 years." The kid's face flushed red, his hands shaking as he tried to fix whatever Dennis found wrong. I recognized that fear. I'd lived with it for 4 years. Dennis looked good for 48, I had to admit. Still had that military posture he was so proud of, that salt and pepper beard he kept perfectly trimmed. His Delacorte distribution supervisor uniform was pressed sharp enough to cut paper. He wore his authority like armor, his voice booming across the warehouse floor with practiced intimidation. The other supervisors gave him space. The workers avoided eye contact. King of his little kingdom. "Mr. Hargrove, should I call him up now?" My assistant Jennifer stood beside me, tablet in hand. She was new, didn't know the history. Didn't know that the man terrorizing the warehouse staff had once made me sleep in the garage during winter because I'd forgotten to take out the trash. "Give him 20 minutes, I said, watching Dennis inspect a shipping manifest with theatrical disgust. "Let him feel comfortable." He was telling a group of loaders about corporate incompetence now, his favorite topic. These executives sit in their air-conditioned offices, making decisions about work they've never done. This new regional manager they're bringing in? Probably some trust fund baby with an MBA and soft hands. I've been here 15 years. I should be running this place. One of the workers nodded along, but I caught his eye roll when Dennis turned away. They tolerated him because they had to, not because they respected him. Fear and respect look similar from a distance, but up close you can see the difference in people's eyes. Dennis pulled out his phone, checking the time with obvious irritation. He had that meeting with the new regional manager in 5 minutes, the mandatory introduction that Frank Delacorte had insisted on before his retirement. "Waste of my time," I heard him mutter, "teaching another college boy how real work gets done." Jennifer cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Hargrove? Call him up." The intercom crackled to life across the warehouse. "Dennis Calhoun to the regional manager's office, please." Dennis Calhoun to the regional manager's office. I watched him straighten his uniform, run a hand through his hair. He said something to another supervisor that made them both laugh, probably another crack about babysitting executives. Then he walked toward the elevator with that confident stride I remembered so well, the one that used to make my stomach clench when I heard it approaching my bedroom door. I moved from the observation window to my office, settling into the leather chair behind the mahogany desk. The office was impressive, even by executive standards. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire distribution complex, awards and certifications covering one wall, a sitting area with expensive furniture that Frank had personally selected. On my computer screen, I pulled up the employee database, Dennis Calhoun's file already open. The knock came exactly 3 minutes later, punctual when it mattered to him. "Come in." Dennis entered with his chest puffed out, that practiced smile of false charm already in place. He was halfway through his opening speech, something about being happy to share his expertise with fresh management, when he actually looked at who was sitting behind the desk. The words died in his throat. His face went through a transformation that would have been comical if it wasn't so satisfying to watch. Confusion first, his eyebrows drawing together. Then recognition, his eyes widening as his brain processed what he was seeing. Then shock, his mouth falling open slightly. "Hello, Dennis. Please, sit down." His legs moved automatically, collapsing into the chair across from my desk more than sitting in it. "Mason?" The word came out strangled, barely a whisper. Mr. Hargrove, I corrected calmly, maintaining professional eye contact. I'm your regional manager now. I believe we have some business to discuss. His face had gone pale, that confident bronze complexion draining away like someone had pulled a plug. This is some kind of joke. This has to be a joke. I assure you, this is very real. I turned my computer screen toward him, angling it so he could see clearly. I wanted to start by reviewing your employment history with us. 15 years is quite a tenure. The screen showed everything. His complete personnel file, every evaluation, every incident report, every single detail of his career at Delacorte Distribution. But more than that, it showed my name at the top as his direct supervisor, my digital signature on his latest performance review. That's when his legs gave out completely. Dennis Calhoun, the man who'd once stood over me while I picked up the dinner plate he'd thrown at the wall because my elbows were on the table, dropped to his knees beside the chair. His hands gripped the edge of my desk like it was the only thing keeping him from falling further. "That's not possible," he whispered, staring at the screen. His whole body was shaking now. "You were nothing. You were worthless. I threw you out." "Yes," I said simply. "You did. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me." 10 years ago, I was just Mason Hargrove, a quiet kid trying to survive in a house that never felt like home. My real father had died in a trucking accident when I was 6, leaving my mother Patricia to raise me and my little sister Amber alone. I still remember the police officer at our door, hat in his hands, my mother's scream echoing through our small apartment. Dad had been hauling steel beams to a construction site in Ohio when another driver fell asleep at the wheel. They said he died instantly. I told myself that meant he didn't suffer, but I was too young to understand that we'd be suffering for years to come. My mother worked 3 jobs trying to keep us afloat. She'd wake up at 4 to prep food at a diner, spend afternoons cleaning office buildings, and stock shelves at a grocery store until midnight. I'd make peanut butter sandwiches for Amber's lunch, help her with homework, tuck her in when Mom was still at work. We were holding on by our fingernails, but we were holding on together. Then Dennis Calhoun walked into our lives like he was doing us a favor. Mom met him at the grocery store where she worked nights. He was buying a 6-pack and frozen dinners, making jokes about bachelor life that made her laugh for the first time in 2 years. He had steady work as a warehouse supervisor at Delacorte Distribution, the biggest shipping company in our county. To my exhausted mother, he must have looked like salvation. The courtship was quick and calculated, though I only recognized that in hindsight. Dennis brought flowers every Friday, took us to restaurants we couldn't afford, bought Amber a pink bicycle for her 8th birthday. He'd ruffle my hair and call me sport and champ, throwing a football with me in the yard while neighbors watched approvingly. My mother's friends said she was lucky to find such a good man, a stable provider who accepted her children. They married 14 months after Dad died. I was 12, old enough to notice how Dennis's smile never quite reached his eyes, how his hand on my shoulder always squeezed a little too hard. The wedding was small but nice. Dennis's family filled one side of the church while our side had just Grandma Ruth, my father's mother, sitting in the front row with tears streaming down her face. They weren't happy tears. After the honeymoon, Dennis moved us into his house on Maple Street, a 3-bedroom ranch with a finished basement and a 2-car garage. It was bigger than anywhere we'd lived since Dad died. Amber got her own room painted purple. Mom could finally quit 2 of her jobs. On paper, our lives had improved dramatically. The changes started small. Dennis would come home from the warehouse frustrated, complaining about incompetent coworkers and clueless management over dinner. "Frank Delacorte hasn't worked a real day in 20 years, he'd say, stabbing at his meatloaf. "Sitting in that executive suite while real men do the actual work. No idea what really goes on down there." He'd turn his attention to me. "You need to toughen up, Mason. Stop reading those books all the time. What are you, some kind of professor? Real men work with their hands. When I brought home straight A's, he'd grunt and say grades didn't matter in the real world. When my English teacher called to say I'd won an essay contest, Dennis hung up on her. My mother changed too, slowly, like someone was turning down her volume knob day by day. She stopped singing while cooking. Her laugh became rare, then extinct. When Dennis criticized my posture, my habits, my existence, she'd give me these apologetic looks but never said anything. She'd become an expert at finding urgent tasks in other rooms when Dennis's voice started rising. "Patricia, your boy needs discipline," Dennis would announce as if I wasn't sitting right there. His real father obviously didn't teach him how to be a man. Mom would flinch at mentions of Dad, but she'd just nod and whisper, "Dennis knows best." My grandmother, Ruth, tried to stay involved, driving over from 2 towns away with casseroles and hand-knitted sweaters. Dennis made it clear she wasn't welcome. "We're not a charity case," he'd say, blocking the doorway. "We don't need handouts from your former in-laws, Patricia." But I'd sneak over to Grandma's house on my bike when Dennis was at work, telling Mom I was at the library. Grandma would make tomato soup and grilled cheese, my father's favorite, while showing me photo albums. "Your daddy was a fighter," she'd say, pointing to pictures of him in his army uniform. "Got that same determination in your eyes, that same goodness in your heart. Don't you let anyone tell you different." School became my sanctuary. While Dennis mocked my academic achievements, calling them participation trophies for weak kids, I threw myself into every subject with desperate intensity. My business teacher, Mr. Vega, saw something in me that Dennis was trying to extinguish. "You've got a strategic mind, Mason," he told me after class one day. "Have you thought about college? Business programs would fight to have someone with your potential." That night at dinner, I made the mistake of mentioning Mr. Vega's encouragement. Dennis's fork clattered onto his plate. "College? You think you're better than me? I make $60,000 a year without any degree. You'll work warehouse like everyone else. Learn what actual work means instead of sitting in classrooms pretending to be something special." Everything exploded the week before my 16th birthday. I'd been saving money for 2 years, every dollar I could scrape together from mowing lawns, shoveling driveways, and tutoring younger kids in math. $540 hidden in an old shoebox under my bed, wrapped in a plastic bag to protect it from moisture. It was my escape fund, my college application money, my future in crumpled 5s and 10s. That Tuesday afternoon, I came home from school to find my bedroom door open. My mattress was flipped against the wall, dresser drawers dumped on the floor, clothes scattered everywhere. Dennis stood in the middle of the chaos, holding my empty shoebox like a trophy. "Stealing from me now?" His voice was calm, which was always worse than yelling. "That's my money," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I earned every dollar of it." "Your money?" He laughed, that harsh bark that made dogs bark back. "You live under my roof, eat my food, use my electricity. Everything you have belongs to me. This money is going toward household expenses. About time you contributed something useful around here." My hands clenched into fists. 2 years of waking up at dawn to mow lawns before school, spending Saturdays hauling mulch until my back screamed, tutoring kids while my own homework waited. "You're a thief. That's for college applications and SAT tests." "College?" He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the cigarettes on his breath. "You're even dumber than I thought. You're not college material, Mason. You're barely high school material. Stop trying to be something you're not." That's when 16 years of holding my tongue, of swallowing insults, of pretending I didn't hear the cruel things he said about my dead father finally erupted. "You're right. I'm not like you. I'll never peak in high school and spend the rest of my life bitter about it. You're a pathetic bully who needs to tear down a kid to feel big." His face turned purple, veins bulging in his neck. My mother appeared in the doorway just as his hand grabbed my collar, lifting me slightly off my feet. "Dennis, please, he didn't mean it." "Patricia, go to your room," he said without looking at her. "This is between me and your son." "But Dennis, and now—" She left. She always left when things got bad, when her presence might have made a difference. I heard her bedroom door close softly down the hall, another betrayal in a house built on them. Dennis dragged me down the stairs, my feet barely touching the steps. He threw me out the front door with enough force that I landed hard on the concrete walkway, palms scraping bloody against the rough surface. I looked up to see our neighbors, the Johnsons, watching from their window. They quickly closed their curtains. "You want to be a big shot?" Dennis stood in the doorway, his silhouette massive against the house lights. "Do it somewhere else. You're not welcome in my house anymore." He disappeared inside and came back with armfuls of my belongings, throwing them onto the lawn with vicious satisfaction. Shirts, jeans, my school uniform, textbooks, even the old baseball glove my father had given me. My copy of To Kill a Mockingbird landed in a puddle. The photo of my dad in his army uniform fluttered across the grass like a wounded bird. "You can't do this." My sister Amber ran out, tears streaming down her 14-year-old face. "Mom, do something. He can't just throw Mason out." Dennis grabbed Amber's arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to control. "Your brother made his choice. He thinks he's too good for this family." "I hate you," Amber screamed at him. "You're not my father. You're nothing." The slap was quick and sharp. Not hard, but enough to shock everyone into silence. Amber touched her cheek, staring at Dennis with a mixture of fear and rage I'd never seen on her face before. "Inside. Now." His voice was deadly quiet. I started to get up, to defend my sister, but Amber shook her head at me. "Go," she mouthed silently. "Just go." I gathered my belongings in a garbage bag I found in our trash can, my hands shaking with rage and humiliation. Rain started falling as I stuffed muddy clothes into the plastic. Mrs. Johnson had opened her door slightly, and I heard her husband say, "Not our business, Karen." My mother's face appeared briefly in her bedroom window. We made eye contact for 1 second before she stepped back into the shadows. That moment broke something in me that took years to repair. I walked away with everything I owned in a garbage bag slung over my shoulder, rain soaking through my thin jacket. I didn't look back, didn't give Dennis the satisfaction of seeing me broken. But I heard Amber crying from inside, heard my mother's muffled sobs, heard Dennis slam the door with brutal finality. The rain turned into a downpour as I walked the 8 miles to my grandmother's house, cars splashing dirty water across my legs. By the time I knocked on her door at 10 that night, I was hypothermic, covered in mud, and crying so hard I couldn't speak. Grandma Ruth opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me inside without a word. She wrapped me in blankets, made hot tea, and held me while I sobbed out the whole story. That night, shivering in my dead father's childhood bedroom, I made a promise to myself. I would become everything Dennis said I couldn't be, and one day, somehow, he would know exactly how wrong he'd been. Living with Grandma Ruth changed everything, though not in the ways I expected. Her house was smaller than Dennis's, a 2-bedroom cottage with radiator heat that clanged all night and windows that rattled when trucks passed. But it felt like home in a way that Maple Street never had. She gave me my father's old room, still decorated with his high school football trophies and a poster of the 1979 Pittsburgh Steelers. "This was always meant to be yours," she said simply. The first morning, I woke up panicking about school. How would I get there? What would people say? Grandma was already up, making breakfast. "Called your principal last night," she said, flipping pancakes. Explained the situation. "The school bus will pick you up here starting tomorrow. Today, we focus on getting you settled." She worked as a seamstress from her living room, altering wedding dresses and suits for 3 dry cleaners in town. The pay was terrible, barely covering her mortgage and utilities. That first week, I watched her counting change to buy groceries and knew I had to contribute. I got a job stocking shelves at Morrison's grocery from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. School started at 7:30. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. "You're gonna burn out, sweetheart," Grandma warned when she found me asleep over my calculus textbook, still wearing my Morrison's uniform. "I'm gonna prove him wrong," I replied, downing another cup of black coffee. "Proving someone wrong isn't a life plan," she said gently. "What do you want to prove to yourself?" I added 2 more jobs within a month. Dishwasher at Antonio's restaurant on weekends. Landscaping with a crew of Mexican immigrants who taught me more Spanish curse words than proper grammar. Every dollar went toward keeping us afloat or into a new savings account Grandma helped me open at a bank where Dennis couldn't touch it. My grades never slipped. If anything, they improved. I studied during 15-minute breaks at Morrison's, did homework in the dish pit when the restaurant was slow, reviewed flashcards while pushing lawnmowers. My teachers noticed the exhaustion but also the determination. Mr. Vega pulled me aside after finding me asleep standing up against my locker. "Mason, you're going to kill yourself at this pace." "I'm fine, Mr. Vega." "No, you're not. But you're also extraordinary. Let me help." He started tutoring me for free during lunch periods, bringing extra sandwiches because he'd noticed I never ate. He helped me apply for every scholarship available, wrote recommendation letters that made me sound heroic instead of desperate. When Dennis had torn up my first applications, I thought college was dead. Mr. Vega resurrected it with fierce determination that matched my own. Community college was all I could afford, even with scholarships, but I attacked it like it was Harvard. Business administration major with a minor in logistics. I scheduled all my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, working the other 5 days. My classmates thought I was antisocial, disappearing the moment lectures ended. They didn't know I had exactly 18 minutes to get to my shift at the warehouse where I'd started loading trucks. Yes, a warehouse. Not Delacorte Distribution, but Richmond Shipping 2 towns over. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was doing the exact work Dennis said I should do, except I was also maintaining a 4.0 GPA and sleeping in my car between shifts to save gas money. Dr. Rodriguez taught my strategic management course. She was brilliant, demanding, and saw through excuses like they were tissue paper. When she announced the Delacorte internship program, my stomach churned. 5 positions available, unpaid, but you'll work directly with Frank Delacorte himself. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Unpaid meant impossible for me, but I applied anyway, pouring everything into that application. 2 weeks later, Dr. Rodriguez called me into her office. "Mason, Frank Delacorte wants to interview you personally. He was impressed by your essay about turning adversity into advantage." The interview was at Delacorte's corporate office, a gleaming building I'd driven past but never entered. Frank Delacorte was nothing like Dennis described. Where Dennis painted him as soft and out of touch, I found a sharp-minded strategist who'd built an empire from a single delivery truck. He asked brutal questions about supply chain efficiency and labor management. I answered with examples from my own warehouse experience. "You work at Richmond Shipping," he noted, reading my resume. "Night shift, while attending school full-time, while maintaining perfect grades." "Yes, sir." "Why?" "Because I have something to prove, Mr. Delacorte. Not to anyone else anymore, but to myself. That circumstances don't define capability." He leaned back, studying me. "The internship is unpaid. How would you manage that?" "I'll make it work, sir. I always do." "No." He held up a hand as my heart sank. "I mean, you won't need to. I'm creating a new position, paid internship specifically for exceptional candidates. Congratulations, you start Monday." The pay was more than I made at Richmond Shipping. I called Grandma from the parking lot, crying for the second time since that night in the rain. "Dad would be so proud," she whispered through her own tears. I threw myself into the internship with desperate hunger. While other interns left at 5, I stayed until security kicked me out. I reorganized filing systems, created efficiency reports nobody asked for, learned every job from the ground up. Frank noticed everything. "You remind me of myself at your age," he said one evening, as we reviewed quarterly projections. "Hungry, angry, determined. What drives you, really?" "Someone told me I was worthless, sir, that I'd never amount to anything." "And you want to prove him wrong?" "I wanted to. Now, I want to prove myself right. There's a difference." Frank smiled, the first genuine warmth I'd seen from him. "Yes, there is. That's the difference between revenge and success. Remember that." The announcement of my promotion to Regional Operations Manager sent shockwaves through the company. At 26, I was the youngest executive in Delacorte Distribution's 40-year history. The email went out on a Thursday afternoon, and by Friday morning, the whispers had reached every corner of the organization. Frank Delacorte himself made the announcement at the quarterly meeting, his hand on my shoulder as he told 200 employees that I represented the future of the company. Mason Hargrove has revolutionized our inventory systems, increased efficiency by 38%, and saved this company millions, Frank said to the assembled crowd. More importantly, he understands every level of this operation because he's worked every level. That's the leadership we need. I knew Dennis was in that crowd, somewhere, but I didn't look for him. Not yet. My first task as Regional Operations Manager was to evaluate and restructure the main warehouse operations, the crown jewel of Delacorte's empire and Dennis's kingdom for 15 years. I spent the weekend reviewing personnel files, productivity reports, and complaint records. Dennis's name appeared frequently, though not in ways that would make anyone proud. 2 formal warnings for inappropriate comments to female coworkers, multiple complaints from subordinates about hostile work environment, declining productivity in his sector for 3 straight years. That Monday morning, I arrived at the warehouse at 6, 2 hours before Dennis's shift. I positioned myself in the observation room overlooking the main floor, watching through the one-way glass as the early crew prepared for the day. At 8 sharp, Dennis strutted in wearing his supervisor uniform like armor, his voice booming across the warehouse before he even clocked in. "All right, ladies, let's pretend we actually want to work today," he announced to the morning crew. "Johnson, those pallets look like a blind man stacked them. Rodriguez, move faster, this isn't a retirement home." The workers exchanged glances but said nothing. They'd learned, like I once had, that responding only made things worse. Dennis held court near the loading dock, regaling 3 younger supervisors with his opinions about the new management. "This boy wonder they brought in, this Hargrove kid," he said, not knowing I could hear every word through the surveillance system. "Probably some Ivy League prince who's never lifted anything heavier than a laptop. Corporate pretty boys don't last long on the floor. I've been here 15 years. I know how things really work." One supervisor, a young woman named Melissa, spoke up. "I heard he started in warehouses, actually worked his way up." Dennis's laugh was cruel and dismissive. "They all say that. Marketing nonsense. Trust me, I'll have him figured out in 5 minutes. These executives are all the same, soft hands and soft spines." I waited 20 minutes, letting him settle into his morning routine of coffee and casual cruelty. Then I had Jennifer make the call. Her voice echoed through the warehouse speakers, cutting through the forklift noise and radio chatter. "Dennis Calhoun to the regional manager's office, please. Dennis Calhoun to the regional manager's office." I watched him check his appearance in a bathroom mirror, straightening his collar and practicing what looked like his serious but respectful face. He made a joke to another supervisor about babysitting executives, then walked to the elevator with confident strides. He had no idea he was walking into a reckoning 10 years in the making. I was seated behind my desk when he entered, my back to the door as I faced the window overlooking the distribution complex. The office was everything Dennis would never have, power and success made tangible in leather and mahogany and glass. About time management came down from their ivory tower, he started, that fake friendly voice I remembered from parent-teacher conferences where he'd charm my teachers while plotting my punishment at home. You need someone to show you how things really work around here. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I can tell you exactly what's wrong with these lazy— I turned around slowly in my chair, giving him the full theatrical moment. His words died mid-sentence, his mouth freezing open as his brain struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. "Hello, Dennis. Please sit down." The color drained from his face in stages, like watching a tide recede in fast motion. White, gray, almost green. "Mason," the word came out strangled, barely audible. "Mr. Hargrove," I corrected, maintaining steady eye contact. "I'm your regional manager now." His body moved in jerky, disconnected motions as he fell into the chair across from my desk. "This is some kind of joke. This has to be a joke. You were nothing. You were worthless." "I was 16, I said calmly, "and you were wrong." I turned my computer monitor toward him, angling it perfectly so he could see every detail. His complete personnel file filled the screen. 15 years of documented behavior, complaints, warnings, performance reviews. But what broke him wasn't his failures. It was the signature at the bottom of every document going forward. Mason Hargrove, Regional Operations Manager. His legs gave out completely. Dennis Calhoun, the man who'd made me eat dinner standing up because I didn't deserve a seat at his table, dropped to his knees beside my desk. His hands gripped the edge like he was drowning, knuckles white with desperation. "Please," he whispered, and I saw tears starting to form in his eyes. "Mason, please, I have bills. Your mother—" "My mother divorced you 3 years ago," I said, keeping my voice professional. "Amber told me everything. The drinking got worse after I left. The anger got worse. Mom finally found her courage when you raised your hand to her. She's living with Amber now, happy for the first time in years." The tears came fully then, rolling down his weathered cheeks. "I'm sorry. I was wrong about you. You have to understand I was just trying to—" "No," I interrupted. "You weren't trying to do anything noble. You were a small man who needed others to feel smaller. You told me I was worthless and threw me out like garbage. That was your choice. Now, you get to live with the consequences." I didn't fire Dennis that day. That would have been revenge, and I'd moved past revenge years ago. Instead, I transferred him to our smallest facility in Riverside, 40 miles from his home, where he'd work under Sandra Reeves, the woman he'd filed a complaint against 5 years earlier for not understanding how men work. When I called Sandra to tell her about the transfer, she laughed for a full minute. "He complained that I was too strict about safety protocols," she said. "Said I was micromanaging because I'm a woman. This is perfect, Mason. I'll make sure he learns what real management looks like." Dennis had 2 choices: accept the transfer with a 20% pay cut and work under Sandra's direct supervision, or resign without severance. He chose to stay. Pride doesn't pay mortgages, and at 48 with no college degree, his options were limited. The man who once told me I'd never amount to anything now drove an hour and 20 minutes each day to take orders from a woman he'd tried to get fired. My mother reached out 3 weeks after the news spread through town. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground where memories couldn't ambush us. She looked older, but somehow younger too, like stress had aged her face but freedom had brightened her eyes. She cried through most of our conversation, apologizing over and over for not protecting me, for choosing Dennis's house over her son's safety. "I was weak," she said, gripping her coffee cup with shaking hands. "I was so tired of being poor, of being alone, and Dennis seemed like stability. I traded your childhood for a false sense of security. I'll never forgive myself." I forgave her that day, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. We talk now, birthdays and holidays, careful conversations about safe topics. She's working as an office manager at a dental practice, living in a small apartment with Amber when she's home from nursing school. She's dating a man named Robert who owns a hardware store and has never raised his voice in the 2 years they've been together. I'm happy for her, but we'll never have the relationship we could have had. Some wounds heal into scars, and scars are just boundaries written on skin. Amber and I grew closer through everything. She became a nurse, inspired by wanting to help people who couldn't help themselves. "Watching you save yourself saved me too," she told me at her graduation. "You showed me that we don't have to accept the life someone else assigns us. We can write our own story." She works in pediatric care now, specializing in cases where abuse is suspected. She has a gift for seeing what others miss, for recognizing the signs of children living in fear. She saved more kids than she can count, given them the intervention we never got. Dennis, stealing her childhood, turned her into a protector of other children's futures. Grandma Ruth lived to see my success, though she passed last year at 73. At her funeral, Frank Delacourt himself gave a eulogy. "Ruth Hargrove raised a giant," he said to the packed church, "not in size but in character. She took a broken boy and helped him build himself into an unbreakable man. That's a legacy worth celebrating." She left me her house and a letter. Inside, she'd written, "Your father would be so proud of who you became, not because of your success, but because you chose kindness over cruelty when you had every reason to choose otherwise. That's the real victory." I still run Delacourt Distribution, though Frank officially retired 2 years ago. We've grown 30% since I took over, but I'm most proud of the program I implemented for young workers from difficult backgrounds. The Hargrove Initiative provides full scholarships, guaranteed jobs, and mentorship for kids aging out of foster care or escaping abusive homes. We've helped over 200 young people transform their lives, turning their trauma into triumph. Last month, one of our program graduates, a young man named Tyler who'd been kicked out by his stepfather at 17, was promoted to warehouse supervisor. He sent me a handwritten thank you note that said, "You showed me that being thrown away doesn't mean you're garbage. It means you're free to become anything you want." Sometimes I drive past the house on Maple Street where Dennis destroyed my childhood. Another family lives there now. I see bikes in the driveway, a tire swing in the oak tree, chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Normal family things that seemed impossible in that house when Dennis ruled it. I hope those kids never know what it's like to be called worthless by someone who should protect them, but if they do, I hope they learn what I learned. The words of broken people only have the power we give them. Dennis called me worthless and kicked me out when I was 16, and it became the greatest gift he ever gave me. Because in trying to destroy me, he forced me to build myself into something unbreakable. He thought he was throwing away trash, but he was actually releasing potential. 10 years later, when he fell to his knees in my office, I realized the truth. I hadn't become his boss to humiliate him. I'd become successful despite him, not because of him. My success was never about Dennis. It was about Mason, about proving to myself that our circumstances don't define our capabilities, that cruelty doesn't create character, and that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's transcendence. It's becoming so far beyond someone's ability to hurt you that their opinion becomes irrelevant. It's building a life so full of purpose that there's no room for old pain. That's what I showed Dennis on my computer screen that day. Not his failures, but my transformation. Not his darkness, but my light. For the first time in his life, Dennis Calhoun understood what he'd truly lost when he threw away a 16-year-old boy. He didn't lose a burden or eliminate a problem. He lost the chance to witness greatness growing in his own home, to be part of something extraordinary, to claim even the smallest connection to a success story that inspires hundreds of others. And that's the ultimate victory. Becoming the person younger you needed to exist. Proving that worthless is just a word angry people use when they're afraid of your potential. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been told you're not enough, remember this. The people who try to define your limits are usually just describing their own. Don't let their small thinking contain your big dreams. Like this video if it touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear that their past doesn't determine their future, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of triumph over adversity. Leave a comment below sharing your own journey of proving doubters wrong. Remember, you're not worthless. You're just waiting to show the world your worth.